We are farmers.
A lot of times if you do advanced work, you might set a theme for something or get an idea for something, and then it might be developed elsewhere in a studio based on that particular brand of car. Whereas with the Reatta, the Buick studio was too busy really to take it on. And I think when the project started, I don't know how solid a project it was, but they wanted to see what you could do. And we had this meeting to talk about it. And they said it could be, it's a two-place E-body car, which was their upscale Riviera, Tornado, Eldorado, but those are 4-passenger, 5-passenger cars. And they had just downsized the cars for '86, so they were actually, the components were small enough, or the general layout of the car was small enough, you could do a 2-passenger car on it, even though that would be big compared to, say, an MG or Miata or whatever, you know, that kind of thing. Going from the original theme sketch, which was based on Jordan's dictate, he said, he got a group of guys in his office and he said, I want a car with no lines. He was tired of seeing drawn lines. He wanted the shape of the car to be the theme. So that's how I did that sketch that I showed you up there on the stairwell, and it was based on just the shape of the car, getting it full rounded sections. And of course you need those to be lean enough. You don't want fat cars. It just doesn't look right. It looks ungainly. It doesn't relate to the wheels very well. And I had a wonderful modeler named Davis Rossi that worked with me, and we developed that scale model you see up top there. And that was the scale model based on my sketch. And from there, then you get, once you get to that phase and see what you can do from there, you get into production inputs. And it's shortened the car. The management wanted the car smaller. Didn't want it too long, because with rounded shapes, to get that round plan view, they get kind of long in the center, but even though they're still short by the wheels. So when that flattens down, then you have to just be more careful how you radius the corners and things like that. So that process of going through all that, of evolving from a doodle, basically, into a real car, it's a very interesting process. And you get a lot of input along the way, and you try to hang on to your original idea. I want it to be like this, and I hope I can keep it that way. And truthfully, those lamp themes were the back lamp defined the back of the car, stayed on the car. It just got flatter as they wanted to shorten it. Well, it starts with the sketches. Once you do the sketches, and sometimes it can be really rough, but if you think there's something there, then you go ahead and make it a good sketch, you know, a finished sketch with color and rendering and all that sort of thing. And sometimes you may start a theme of a car, but it won't have finished detail. I'll show you a good example of that. So what I have here then is the top sketch up there is the original idea for the Reatta. And that's, as you can see, it's not exactly generic, but all of the themes that I used in the final car are there. And the main thing was, we went to, the background for that is that Jordan called us in. There was a program going on in the building for an E two-place car. An E was like the Eldorado, Tornado, and Riviera, which are 4-passenger, 5-passenger cars. And they were doing a shortened version as a 2-seater. And there was one of the advanced studios was doing a car and they weren't liking it. So Jordan called in a whole bunch of designers. I was like one of, I don't even know how many, maybe 10 or more, from different studios around the building. And he called us in and he talked about the car and the project and what they wanted to do. And he said, I want a car with no lines. So no lines to me meant, well, then you've got to do things with the section of the body, how round is it, whatever. And the shape of the car has to be the theme. So rounded sides, the plan views, as you can see on that, the plan views are very round. So the themes that came out of that then were, how do you define, it's just going to be a blob if you don't do some definition on it. So the taillight became a very important item on that particular sketch. To define the plan view of the rear so you'd see it, but there's no lines. It's just, the taillight, just the edges of the taillight actually shows you the rhythm around the car. And then in the front, you get a repeat of that by wrapping the corner with parking lights, long skinny parking lights to show the plan view of the front end. This sketch came later when we had some production inputs after we did the initial. I did a scale first, which I have a picture of down there. And then we had to add in some features and some requests from management to take care of the car. They thought the car looked a little too big with those soft shoulders like that, so we added lines to it ultimately. But the lines express around the car, front and rear, express the roundness of the plan view, and we made it as round as we could. To your question before about dealing with engineering, in that time frame, some of the advances that had been made in fascias and safety systems in the bumpers weren't available when this car was done. And this is early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. So, no, early 80s, I'm sorry, 82 was when that sketch is done. So, to get this front as round as possible was really tough. So anyway, when we added the lines, it helped lead the eye around the car so that you'd still have that sense of roundness. But the components underneath were carryover, which meant that they were already using the basic box that held the engine and the wheels and all that stuff in the front. So we had to go around that and clear it as tight as we possibly could. And that made the front a little longer. Ultimately, as you can see on this car, it has full offset bumpers, which was not what the original car was supposed to be. It was a little tighter. But to meet those crash requirements, they had to extend that. The back bumper was not extended very much. It was okay pretty much that way. What I had to do was to flatten the plan view, so it's not quite as round in the back as the original sketch, but it was still, for the time, much rounder than anything that was around being done at the time. And the only thing I did to make this is based on the Riviera components, and it had to use the Riviera instrument panels. That set up the plan view of the windshield. So we took the plan view of the windshield and tried to make this as round as we could, but also be compatible with that, so it stayed consistent. As you can see in that sketch, the windshield is very round, the front is very round. And then as the program goes on, from that, which was basically fairly, I would say, generic for what it is, it's just a shape study with some graphics on it, you had to get into identity of the brand. And when we first started it, they said it could be Buick or Cadillac. Well, it wound up being Buick because Cadillac was done in Italy by Pininfarina. So Cadillac did not want GM's input. They wanted to take it out. They were kind of upset with design at that point, I think. And the head of Cadillac said, And so we did this as a Buick. So then when you get to the front, then you have to give some identity to the brand. I already had the grille was down low, so it was a matter of just putting in like the vertical teeth that was more of a brand identifier for Buick. And then in the middle, in the door area, I wiped out the crisp lines that went over the wheels to make it different from the Riviera, which had a full-length hard-line bevel. It was characteristic of Buick Rivieras. And I didn't want this car to look like it was a two-passenger Riviera, so we smoothed out the middle and then just went into the lines that defined the plan view. Well, just thrilling to have anything that you did all the way through, from the concept sketch to the production car. It was kind of unusual at the time, at least I think it was, to stay with the car all the way through the program. Usually, you, like I said, like on the Grand Prix, went upstairs to the production studios and they finished the car. In this case, Buick Studio had enough to do, said they didn't need another car in their studio, which was a big studio, but they had a lot of car lines to deal with. So this stayed in my studio, and I was the assistant chief designer by then, in the 80s. And so I stayed with the car, and it was done in our studio. And they had one Buick engineer came down and worked with us too, to kind of follow the progress of what was going on, and probably connect back with the Buick division on the engineering and so on. So this became quite a thing, for me personally. Like I say, my 15 minutes of fame, because, after the car gets done, they come in and say, okay, now what do you got? So you go on to the next program. Absolutely. Because ultimately, the best thing about cars is getting in them and driving them. Because you want to, that's what it's about. Freedom, get out on the road, go somewhere. So yeah, it was thrilling, it was thrilling. I worked on the 95 Monte Carlo in Chevrolet studio, and at that time I was getting a company car. And so I went over to the garage that they had set up for company cars, and said, they had this car that at that time they were just giving you something that Chevrolet made. Really, is there any chance I could drive like something I worked on? You know, like spent 4 years of my life on? And the woman kind of looked at me funny, went in the back room, came out, keys to a beautiful black Monte Carlo, 95 Monte Carlo. So yes, it's thrilling. It's thrilling to be able to drive something you worked on.
Very cool.
Yeah, really cool.